What's up, everyone? This is the Next Tape Podcast, episode 199 with Mikel and
Tanyka.
where we have conversations on different topics. So, today's episode, we're doing a singular topic episode, and we are going to tell you about the topic. Tanyka?
So the topic for today is, I will just preface right now, it's going to be a tougher one, but we're going to be talking about Robert Pickton.
Mm.
That is who we're going to be talking about. Now, I'm going to assume right off the bat, Mikel, you do not know the story. That
Nope.
is okay. We did briefly mention him, I think last year when he died. I think actually about a year ago.
Right.
And good riddance. Bye. Um, but this is Canadian case. It's a true crime case. It's a Canadian case. Hate it, but it is what it is. Based out of BC. So you're ready to jump into it? Ready to get disgusted?
All right. Go ahead.
All right. So between 1978 and 2001, at least 65 women disappeared from Vancouver's downtown east side. Robert Pickton, who operated a pig farm in nearby Port Coquitlam, was charged with murdering 26 of those women. He was convicted on 6 charges and sentenced to life in prison. And he served his life in prison. In a jail cell conversation with an undercover police officer, Pickton claimed to have murdered 49 women. The murders led to the largest serial killer investigation in Canadian history, and Pickton's farm became the largest crime scene in Canadian history. The case became a flashpoint in the wider issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada. In 2012, a provincial government inquiry into the case concluded that blatant failures by police, including inept criminal investigative work, compounded by police societal prejudice against sex trade workers and Indigenous women, led to a tragedy of epic proportions. So let's get into the darkness of this case. So the Pickton farm. Robert William, or Willie Pickton, who was born in 1949, was raised on a family-operated pig farm in Port Coquitlam in British Columbia. Pickton and his siblings sold most of the property for urban development, reducing the farm to 6.5 hectares. Pickton maintained a small-scale livestock operation at the farm. He also received a share of the proceeds from the real estate transactions and was a partner with his brother David in a salvage company. Pickton was a socially awkward man who was known to have exhibited strange behaviors. He lived alone in a trailer home on the farm. In 1996, the Pickton brothers started the Piggy's Palace Good Time Society. It was a federally registered charity with an alleged mandate to raise funds for service organizations through events such as dances and shows. Neighbors complained of rowdiness, drug use, drunkenness, and noise. The parties were attended by as many as 1,700 people, including bikers and sex trade workers from the downtown east side. In 2000, the city of Port Coquitlam shut Piggy's Palace down. So a little bit about downtown east side, so we're going to go into that a little bit. Vancouver's downtown east side neighborhood is known for its high rates of poverty, homelessness, open drug use, and prostitution, which clearly leads to this was just a hunting ground for this guy. In the late 1990s, 80% of the girls and women working in the sex trade came from outside of Vancouver. Some had not had contact with their families for years. A survey of 183 sex trade workers conducted by the Prostitution Alternatives Counseling and Education, or PACE Society, between 1999 and 2001 revealed that acts of violence against these women were frequent. They were subjected to robberies, beatings, kidnappings, and forced confinement. The survey showed a gulf between acts of violence suffered and acts of violence reported. So that's basically saying the things are
Mm,
happening, but the women aren't reporting it because obviously, as we know, women tend to be a little wary of reporting anything that happens to them, especially we're talking about sex workers.
uh-huh,
The findings also indicated that the women had a profound distrust of police and other authorities. Pickton became familiar with the downtown east side through visits to a rendering plant relocated there. Located there. A
right.
little bit more about that renting plant later, where he disposed of waste and animal parts. Hold on to that. He would cruise the 10-block strip called the Low Track, offer women money and drugs, and often take them back to his farm. So let's get into those disappearances with that said. In 1978, a joint RCMP Vancouver Police Department Missing Women Task Force began compiling a list of missing women. The earliest case on the list connected to Pickton was that of Diana Melnick, last seen on December 22nd, 1995. Pickton was not convicted of her murder, by the way, just to put that out there. The most recent case on the list connected to Pickton and one of the 6 murders for which he was convicted was that of Mona Wilson, last seen in November 2001. Of the 26 disappearances officially attributed to Pickton, 1 occurred in 1995, 1 in 96, 6 in 1997, 4 in 1998, 5 in 1999, 2 in 2000, and 7 in 2001. Other disappearances before and during this period were not officially connected to Pickton due to a lack of evidence. Because of the marginalized lifestyles and transient habits of the victims and other people in downtown Eastside, disappearances often went unnoticed. The disappearance of Sherry Rail, who vanished in 1984, was not reported for 3 years. In 1987, the RCMP set up a special team to investigate the unsolved murders and disappearances of sex trade workers. It was disbanded in 1989 due to limited progress.
Huh.
So, over the years, as the rate of disappearances escalated, rumors of a serial killer began to circulate in the downtown east side. Sex trade workers began walking the low track in groups and writing down the license plate numbers of cars that picked women up, but the disappearances continued. In 1991, the families of missing women, along with advocates for sex trade workers, established an annual Valentine's Day Remembrance Walk as a memorial to murdered and missing victims. They demanded a thorough investigation, but the police response was sluggish at best. The Vancouver police refused to say that a serial killer was at work, or even consider that the missing women were dead. There were no bodies to warrant an investigation. That would be a strain on police resources. We'll get to that. To police, it seemed reasonable to presume that some of the women had moved away and others had died from drug overdoses. There were complaints of police apathy, particularly from the Vancouver Sun newspaper. It accused the police of giving low priority to crimes committed against sex trade workers. The Vancouver Police Department was also hampered by its reluctance to adopt newly emerging methods of investigation, such as psychological criminal profiling and geoprofiling, which
Mm.
is crazy that geoprofiling was kind of a thing even, I guess, I don't know if they're saying in the 90s, but
Yeah,
geoprofiling is
interesting. Yeah,
still in the works, I feel. But anyways,
yeah, yeah.
many of the missing women were also Indigenous. As the Pickton case unfolded with its many Indigenous victims, it focused on public attention on the wider issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada, which we are obviously still dealing with today. So we've learned nothing. Um, this in turn led to a natural government inquiry into the issue beginning in 2016, so
Mm.
long after he was in prison. So on March 22nd, 1997, a woman Pickton had taken to his farm fought back when he tried to handcuff her. She seized a kitchen knife, and in the ensuing struggle, both received serious stab wounds. The woman ran to the road and waved down a car, whose occupants called an ambulance. She was taken to Royal Columbian Hospital in New Westminster. While the woman was undergoing emergency surgery, Pickton was receiving treatment for his injuries in the same hospital. An orderly found a key in his pocket that fit the handcuffs on the woman's wrist. Pickton was arrested and charged with attempted murder, assault with a weapon, and forcible confinement. The charges were stayed, which means they were essentially dropped, and eventually dropped because the woman, whose name was placed under the protection of a publication ban by the courts, is why we don't know her name today, was not considered a competent witness due to drug addiction. Pickton claimed she was a hitchhiker who had attacked him. So, because she does drugs, she doesn't deserve the same justice as anyone else. So, just to say, that's clearly what they're saying.
Right.
In the spring of 1999, an informant told the Vancouver police that a single mother and drug addict named Lynn, I think it's Ellingenson, had
Mm.
seen a woman's body hanging in Picton's slaughterhouse. When questioned by police, Ellingson initially denied the story. Only much later did she admit that on March 20th, she had in fact seen the body. She did not report it because she feared Pickton and depended on him for money for drugs. Early in 1999, Bill Hiscox, who worked for the Picktons, informed the RCMP that Lisa Yelds, a close friend of Pickton, had told Hiscox she had seen women's clothing, purses, and identification papers at the pig farm. Hiscox believed they were the property of the missing women. Police questioned Yelds, but she wasn't cooperative. It was the second time Hiscox had contacted police about his suspicions, but they could not obtain a search warrant based on hearsay evidence.
Mm.
Which, if you don't know what that means, it's verbal information reported by someone who was not directly a witness to it.
Right.
They required an eyewitness report of criminal activity or the existence of physical evidence. In 2001, the Vancouver Police and the RCMP formed Project Even-Handed, a joint task force to investigate the missing women from the downtown east side. In early February 2002, Scott Chubb, formerly employed by the Pickton family as a truck driver, informed the RCMP in Port Coquitlam that he had personally seen illegal guns in Pickton's trailer home. That information met the official requirement for a search warrant. On February 5th, officers of the task force raided the pig farm. In addition to several illegal and unregistered guns, they found items connecting missing women to the property. Pickton was arrested on weapons charges and then released on bail. God. He was kept under surveillance and was not permitted to return to the pig farm while police conducted a thorough search under the second warrant. Among the evidence they discovered were handcuffs, women's clothing and shoes, jewelry, and an asthma inhaler prescribed to Serena Apitsway, one of the missing women. DNA
Mm.
testing of blood found in a motorhome on the property proved to be that of Mona Wilson. On February 22nd, 2002, Pickton was rearrested and charged with 2 counts of murder. A total of 26 murder charges were eventually laid against him. While Pickton was being held in jail in Surrey, British Columbia, he shared a cell with an undercover RCMP officer he believed to be another detainee. Love it when they do this. In their conversation, Pickton said he had murdered 49 women and had wanted to make it 50. Gross.
Mm.
Meanwhile, back at the pig farm, it became the largest crime scene in Canadian history. You're probably wondering why. We're going to get to it. Investigators took 200,000 DNA samples and seized 600,000 exhibits. Archaeologists and forensic experts needed heavy equipment to sift through 383,000 cubic yards of soil in search of human remains. The cost of this investigation was estimated at nearly $70 million at the time. Yeah. I don't know if we're going to get into the really nitty-gritty here, but trust me, I will. Because now we're at the trial and the imprisonment. So Pickton's preliminary hearing to decide if there was enough evidence for trial lasted from January to July 2003. Due to the unprecedented volume and complexity of legal issues that had to be litigated, his trial on the first 6 charges did not begin until January 22nd, 2007, in New Westminster. On December 9th, 2007, Pickton was found guilty by a jury on 6 counts of second-degree murder.
Mhm.
Second-degree murder? God, do
Mm.
better. This is first. Anyways, he was sentenced to life imprisonment in a federal penitentiary with
All right.
no possibility of parole for 25 years. Psych, he never got out. Well,
Huh.
not he got out in a body bag. Those convictions were upheld by the Supreme Court of Canada in 2010 because obviously he appealed. Although Pickton claimed to have murdered 49 women, he was only charged with the murders of 26 who could be identified with evidence found on the pig farm. There's also one additional unidentified woman whose remains were found, who was given the name Jane Doe. The Jane Doe charge was eventually dismissed by the court because of a lack of information about her identity and the time of her death, which I don't even know why that matters. But anyways, after Pickton was convicted of 6 charges in the initial trial, British Columbia Crown prosecutors kept open the possibility of trying Pickton on the other 20 charges at a later date. However, on August 4th, 2010, prosecutors announced they would not proceed on the 20 charges. They said a second trial, even if further convictions were achieved, would not add anything to Pickton's punishment, which was already the maximum possible under the law, Canadian law. The decision angered some of the families of the 20 victims. Others said they were relieved at being spared the experience of another long and difficult trial. In
Mm.
2010, a provincial government inquiry was established to examine the Pickton case and how it was handled by authorities. In December 2012, the Missing Women Commission of Inquiry issued its final report titled Forsaken. The inquiry said, quote, blatant failures by police, including inept criminal investigative work, compounded by police and societal prejudice against sex trade workers and Indigenous women, had led to a tragedy of epic proportions, as I already mentioned. The inquiry issued 63 recommendations, including the creation of a Greater Vancouver Regional Police Force to allow for more effective, less fragmented police cooperation. It also called for adequate funding for emergency shelters for women in the sex trade and for compensation for children of the missing women. Following the report, the Vancouver Police Department implemented several policy and procedural changes to its missing persons investigations. The Missing Persons Unit was made a regular part of the police department. Investigations are required to begin without delay. Family members are advised regularly and consulted before the release of information, and the case file is kept open until the missing person is located. So the
Mm.
aftermath and then his death. In 2016, an autobiographical book titled Pickton, in his own words, allegedly written by Pickton and smuggled out of prison, was published by Outskirts Press of Denver, Colorado. It was
Mhm.
offered for sale on Amazon.com, but was withdrawn due to public outrage. You think?
Mm.
On May 19th, 2004, Pickton was attacked in what Correctional Service Canada called a major assault at the maximum security Port Cartier institution in Quebec. Martin Charest, a 51-year-old fellow inmate, stabbed Pickton in the head with a broken broom or broom-like handle. The 74-year-old Pickton was put on life support in a medically induced coma. He then died on May 31st.
Mm.
Bye. Charest was charged with
Wow.
first-degree murder in Pickton's death on July 3rd, 2025. But you know what? He did the Lord's work. Because here's the thing. This article
Mhm.
isn't going into the really nitty-gritty of this. I'm
All
about
right.
to. So buckle up, y'all, because this is going to get gross.
Mm.
The reason they didn't find the bodies of these women
Mhm.
is because it is pretty much believed, obviously can't be fact checked, but it is believed that he fed his victims to his pigs and then would take said pigs, slaughter them, and obviously feed those pigs to people around the area. Some of his meat was sold across Canada. There's also rumors that he skipped the pigs entirely and would feed human remains, human parts to
Wow.
people in and around his area. The rendering plant, he would take parts of his victims to the rendering plants. So let me put this into the clearest words that I can. There are parts of these victims potentially all over Canada for
Wow.
people to consume one way or another. I That is a fact. That is something that this article isn't going to talk about because this is a Canadian article too.
Mm-hmm.
So I can imagine that Canada wants to wipe that part out altogether because yikes. But that is the truth. There's also the fact that they're not sure if his brother, who mentioned very briefly, David, was at all involved in this or at least had some knowledge of what he was doing. But this is what was happening. And he was a menace to society. He, you know, he had this bar, like we mentioned, his bar that he had. Um, he was a horrible person. So good riddance. I'm glad he's dead. Um, but if you really want to see this case play out to some degree, obviously it is a fictional show, but I think this show really did showcase this case in the best way possible. And that is a Criminal Minds case show. It's a two-parter, and it it really shows this case and exactly what happened. Obviously, like I said, it's fictional. There are things that are added for the show to happen. Um, but because because it's obviously the FBI, right? The Criminal
Right.
Minds is the behavioral unit. And there is like a part, 'cause there's like a brother, but there's a brother, as I've mentioned, that is kind of facilitating things. Like I said, we do not know if his brother was facilitating anything or was involved in anything or even had knowledge of it. That's never been
Uh-huh.
confirmed. But this brother is going into the States, grabbing sex workers, and then bringing them back into Canada. And I believe it was actually in Ontario. They based the show out of. It wasn't BC. Um, because I'm pretty sure they were in Sarnia, if I remember correctly, which obviously
Uh-huh.
is you cross right over and you're in the States, right?
Right.
So, um, that's what they were doing. And once they were able to trace that back to Canada, to Ontario, and they found the farm, there's the pigs, there's whatever, and it's very similar to this case. I think this honestly, hate to say one of my favorite, but it's one of my favorite episodes is that episode, this two-parter episode. Um, and it's really well done. So I think like if you want a visual of this, that's the best way to get it.
Mm.
Um, and it's fictional, so it's, you don't feel too gross. But obviously, if you know anything about Criminal Minds, they do get their details in their show ideas off of real cases, and that's the case. Um, but yeah, that's Robert Pickton. Burn in hell, asshole.
Yeah.
And I hope he is. Um, and it's just really sad because it's like,
Uh-huh.
you know, kind of seeing how this played out with Indigenous women and sex workers and kind of saying like, at least with Indigenous women, not much has changed really. And
Right.
like their lives matter. All lives matter, you know? And, let's not jump to the conclusion of, oh, they moved on and they ran off, or maybe they died of an overdose. Okay. If they died of an overdose, where's the body? Where are they? No, you don't just die from an overdose and just disappear, you know? It's ridiculous. Um, But anyways, that is Robert Pickton. That is the
Yep.
case.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. What a disgusting human being.
Disgusting.
Yeah. Something else to say about that.
I try not to think
But
of whether or not, because we were alive when this was happening.
right.
Partially, obviously he was going on for a while, but we were alive through the majority of his crimes, and
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
hard to be like, did we eat his product?
Hmm.
And that part, when that kind of information came out and it's like his meat was being distributed across Canada, I'm like, oh God, like, did we? This is why people don't eat pigs.
Right.
This is why.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of, religious reasons and stuff that people don't eat pork. This is why. Because pigs
Hmm.
will eat anything. It's scary.
Yeah.
Anyways,
You're right. Yeah.
I'm still gonna eat bacon. But but, yeah, it's just I try not to think about that because that's
Yep.
so sick.
Yep. I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I have
Anyways,
nothing else to say about that. And yeah. Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
All
Alright.
right.
So anyways, we'll be back,
Yeah.
next week with, um, another episode. We're
All
getting
right.
close to our 200th, actually. I
Oh
think that
yeah,
might be
yeah, that's
next
right.
week, actually.
That's
Yeah,
right.
so
That's
it's
right.
next week.
Next week,
Yeah, it's next
we're close
week.
to 200. Yep.
Yeah. I think it's actually our
Yeah.
next episode.
We
It's
do. We
it's
don't know what we're gonna do. So
Oh, no. I have some ideas, but we're just gonna
Oh,
have,
do
like,
we?
a laid
Oh,
yeah, I have some ideas. But we're
okay.
just gonna have, like, a laid back type of situation, have fun with it, as we usually do for these types of
Mhm.
episodes, so,
Mhm.
yeah, that's what we'll
Okay.
do.
All right. That's what we're gonna do. All right. All right.
Alright. That's it.
Peace, guys.
Bye. If you liked what you heard with our podcast, you can head on over to our website, which is solo.to/next take podcast. There you can get any of the links to any of our social media, which is Facebook, Instagram at Next Take Podcast, and Twitter, TikTok, and Blue Sky at Next Take Pod. You can also find links to our Reddit page and many other things, I'm sure. Can't remember all the top of my head. You can also email us at mikeltanyka@gmail.com. There you can send us any inquiries that you have, any questions, or also any episode ideas. And if you do have episode ideas, just make sure you put in the subject line episode ideas, and we'll add it to our list. If you also liked us, you can like us, rate us, follow us on any of your favorite podcast apps. You can rate us, however, on Spotify and Apple Podcast. We would greatly appreciate that. And we'll also move forward and share or spot a light on those who give us 5-star ratings in the future. That is it for us. We'll see you next time for the episode.